Leadership is the foundation of society. Without effective leadership, some of the greatest technological and social innovations would not have been possible. We need more leaders in our world today, and there needs to be more minority leadership. As a white male, I recognize my identity represents the vast majority of corporation and project managers across America. This project examines African Americans, one of these minorities. I chose to focus on African Americans because I work with this identity as a leader of the Newslink, Indiana weather team at Ball State University. I want to understand how I can make the space more inclusive for all minorities, including African Americans, while on the job. Through this project, I'm looking to understand the state of African American leadership and how we can improve upon the current statistics. I desire to recognize the barriers this identity faces, explore what silences them, discover their motivations, and discuss the future of African Americans in leadership. I decided to look through the lens of two prominent African American leaders from my hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana, to complete this project. My first interview was with Ray Sims. He is the former head coach of the boys basketball team at R. Nelson Snyder High School in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He grew up in East Chicago, Indiana, in a middle-class residential neighborhood. He has a degree from Indiana Wesleyan in Health and Physical Education with a minor in Social Studies. He is married with 2 sons and just recently became a grandfather as well. My second interview was with Mitchell McKinney. He is a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department. He grew up in Fort Wayne in an African American neighborhood, but was raised in the Catholic religion. He is the youngest of 6 children. He attended Ball State University and was active in various music ensembles, and served as the Pledge Marshal Secretary and later President of Theta Chi fraternity before he left campus. He later finished his bachelor's degree in criminal justice at Indiana Wesleyan in 2009. I began by asking each of them to describe if they have experienced barriers or difficulties either growing up or on their job because of their race.
Once I went to college, that's when I first started to experience some racial disparities. A perfect example, when I went off to college, a lot of athletes stayed on the same floor, and we would get together and we would study together in a study group. And as my white friends were getting A's and B's on certain assignments, mine was a C. And I'm saying, we study together, our answers are basically the same, and their grade is higher than mine, until I confronted a professor about that. He looked at me in shock, and all of a sudden my grade was a little bit higher. My grade started to be a little bit higher when he was subjectively grading on paper. So I started to experience and see it. I saw it professionally, especially when I was at Snyder High School. Whenever you're the first at something, it seems kind of strange. For instance, me being the first black head basketball coach at Snyder High School. Why should that be? I'm only the second head coach of color ever in the history of Snyder High School. There was a track coach. I never met him back in the early 70s. But besides that, I was it. And I always wondered at Snyder High School, and while you were a student there, I was the only black male teacher in the building for a lot of years. Why is that when you have an urban school district and I'm the only black male teacher in the whole building? So I could go on and on professionally. My color of my skin has always made a difference.
Law enforcement had started, is now, and will forever be a white male-dominated profession. It's just historical. If you go back to any pictures and just Google pictures of law enforcement back in the 1890s, and you're going to see 2 things distinctive about law enforcement. They were all Caucasian, and they were all males. And so if you follow that lineage and you want to do what your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your great-great-great-grandfather, and you want to follow that lineage in the profession, then history will tell us that the generational effect of that will be that law enforcement will be majority Caucasian and majority male. And it remains that way today. My skills in the department are second to none. And I earned my rank and my position, and as you know, I have the rank of captain now. Out of 30 commanders, there are 2 of color, being 2 captains of color. There's others in my race on the department that will never climb this ladder. It's a good old boy system. It's hard to crack, but I did so successfully with the skills that I bring to the table.
And you can hear some of my own reactions to the information presented by Mr. Sims in our phone conversation. And the truth is, African Americans make up very little of the top leadership positions in our country. According to a June 2019 study by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, supported by the Center for Talent Innovation, African Americans remain marginalized in corporate America. Blacks represent 0.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs, 3.2% of executives are African American, only 8% of African Americans are professionals, and only 10% of African Americans hold college degrees. So what are the sources of these numbers, and how can we change them in the future? Mitchell McKinney explains.
The future of African American leadership lies in the hands of the parents that are raising children today. So many times homes are single parents and low income. Most children follow the paths that are paved for them. If opportunity escapes their parents, data shows that it will escape the children as well. Mentors come in every race and gender, most of the time in the form of a teacher along your academic route. The unfortunate part is that the information does not hold significant weight in the shaping of the student, because seldom times is there someone at home that has the same academic achievement post-high school that you're trying to achieve. If you come from a low-income home, more than likely your parents didn't have academic achievement possibilities, and they weren't afforded opportunities to go forth and to earn better jobs and to do other things, and they didn't have the mentors, they may not have the money, so it's hard for people to compare themselves to those who have gone that far and moved on to other professions, and usually it makes them move out of the neighborhood and move to better housing and get closer to all the things they need in life. Most times when we find people in low social economic areas, we see that they're lacking because they can't move from where they are, and the affordability is just not there.
Now that I understand why there are few African Americans in leadership and how this can be changed, I next wanted to know how each of them dealt with the issue of race as a leader.
What my dad always, told me, son, always respect, authority. And
Yes.
and he said things will be a lot more easy for you if you respect authority. And that's what I have always done. And in my own job, for instance, teaching and coaching, I have always took the leadership role to set the example that, hey, whatever you grew up with and the stereotypes that you grew up with, I'm going to change your attitude, about that. And it came very easy for me because I was just always me. When you try to be something that you're not, it will become self-evident to people that, hey, he's putting on a show. And that's the last thing I've ever wanted to do.
Well, my race impacts my leadership ability in several ways, most importantly in how others in my race see me, and how those I instruct and lead respond with hard work and positive community results. I hear on many occasions how proud others in my race are of me, and how it is good to see an African American in a position of authority with high integrity and character. These compliments also come regularly from other races as well.
As a white male leader, I have the utmost respect and admiration for African American leaders who are true to themselves and reach for the stars. They stand up to historical prejudices and focus on high integrity and character. In my mind, I feel they may be even more qualified than myself to lead because they have overcome so much. We've already discussed social and economic barriers, but what else stands in their way? The answer to that is one of the fundamental pieces of this class, the feeling of silence brought about by a predominantly white culture. Ray Sims offers his honest take on this issue.
That's how you make change, by someone standing up. And it only takes one person to stand up. And how come that one person can't be you? You know, some people, they're told, if you want to get along, just keep your mouth closed. and then if you speak up, you're a rebel rouser. You're difficult. You know, you're too aggressive. Wait your turn. You know, the country isn't ready for you yet. You know, those are some of the things that, you know, people just have to just keep plugging away. And I really feel sorry for people that feel that they cannot voice their opinion and their true feelings without being crucified.
Why can't it be us? Why do we feel we have to wait our turn? This advice can be applied across all races and identities. I have the same opportunity to break the silence as they do. I have learned about how African American leaders can stay true to themselves and fight against injustice, but what can I do as a leader myself? Now that I recognize their perspectives as African American leaders, I want to understand their perspective of my identity as a leader and hear their advice to me. I asked both Mitchell McKinney and Ray Sims to speak at length on this topic.
In my opinion, it's up to the individual leader to address situations and improve relations on a case-by-case basis. Most problems with race are based on community perceptions, and many are falsehoods and rhetoric that many African Americans wallow in so that they have subject matter to gain market value with other African Americans. For example, look at how many African American leaders still hold that there is an issue with white officer and black males. It's a falsehood that went viral because of social media. Now, were there instances where we had white officers that did wrong by African American and even Latino males? Absolutely there were. So don't get me wrong on that. It is not a complete blanket statement, but I will tell you this. I've instructed over 100 classes in Fort Wayne about civility and proper treatment with many different citizens of many different cultures, and I've asked for examples of Fort Wayne officers who have committed hate crimes against African Americans. I have the same ream of paper that I've had down there, the note paper I've had sitting there at every meeting. I bring it out every single time, and I have yet to have one example given. I've asked for an address, I've asked for a name, I've asked for a date, I've asked for a location, and that's information I have to have so I can search it out in the records and see the reports and be able to follow up with the citizen and follow up with internal affairs if need be. And again, so I've been in this position since February of 2018, and in all the classes that I've been out in the community teaching, I've yet to have one person, and I've had many audiences come forth and lay down information. It's pretty simple. We're just back to the golden rule. Treat everyone, and I mean everyone, the way that you want to be treated. Do not let their race, creed, sexual orientation, social economic status, marital status, religion, etc. matter at all. It comes down to mutual respect. You can make things inclusive by following equal employment opportunity requirements and allow all people to apply for jobs. Erase implicit biases and allow open-minded people to recruit, interview, and hire the best qualified employees, and make sure to communicate the atmosphere you are creating in your workforce. What an awesome team you will make by doing that.
If you look at a person's worth and not at the color of their skin, and if we get away from, and we need to get away from, hey, I'm going to hire someone who looks like me. Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of it starts. And at the same time, I remember Arthur Ashe. He made a comment years ago when he was still living. He made a comment that what makes him upset is when a person who's not qualified for a job yells racism and they're not qualified for a job. And what makes him equally upset is when someone is qualified for a job and they do not get the job because of the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, so we just have to look past race, and we have to look past the stereotypes that we have built up over the years. Judge people on their self-worth. Don't judge people through your own built-up prejudices, because we all have some innate prejudices in our heart, in our mind. We all have some stereotypes, because I have some. But at the same time, what you should always do is judge people on their actions and not look at the color of their skin. And that's number one.
This is fantastic advice. Always judge people on their qualifications and not on their skin color. Through the course of my conversation with Mr. Sims, he speaks at length about how his dad was his hero and how mad he felt when people told him to go back to his home country. We concluded our conversation by going into a discussion on a current controversy involving the NASCAR driver Kyle Larson's use of the N-word. We discussed how a leader is always representing themselves and a company. Racial injustice cannot be tolerated. Using that word is not acceptable, and it is sad to still see something of this nature still in the national spotlight today. Mr. McKinney discusses throughout how much he relies on his faith as an African American leader. He concludes by offering these words of advice to African American leaders, although these words can be applied across all identities.
So I would tell all of you that true leaders find the right road and begin paving their own. Regardless of what a mentor has done for you, you need to start paving your own road. And I'm proud of the road I've paved as an African American leader in law enforcement and in life in general.
Ultimately, structural racism, quote, lies underneath, all around, and across society, end quote. This definition is courtesy of a 2004 presentation on structural racism by Keith Lawrence and Terry Keller at the National Race and Public Policy Conference. Leaders need to strive for racial justice and equity. I have learned about the barriers African American leaders face and what they have to overcome. I understand the facts behind African Americans in leadership and why they oftentimes struggle in silence. Most importantly, I have learned how I can improve as a leader on campus in a system that historically favors the white male. It is up to me to improve the outlook for African Americans and support them to reach their goals. I have an opportunity my senior year to use lessons learned from this project and this class. I cannot wait to take what I have learned and apply it next fall. So go out and thank an African American leader. Talk to them and get to know them. Odds are they have overcome significant barriers, and we can learn so much from them. Thank you.